Our next guest is Jason Aron. You know, I've had several filmmakers on the show in the past. I love everything that independent filmmakers do. And when I was tooling around looking for guests, I came across this gentleman. I'm going to let him. I'm going to bring him on the air here in just a second. I loved reading his bio and everything he did. He went to school. He's a New Yorker, and went to school for law, and kind of changed gears a little bit and went into filmmaking. And he has done a lot of film shoots with sports personalities and experts. His bio reads so well, and he came. What drew me to Jason was he did a documentary, a film project of his own called Back in Time. It's a film that's going to release this fall. It is about the Back to the Future franchise. It's a cultural relevance from the perspective of a DeLorean time machine. Back to the Future and the whole series of movies, so interesting. And that's why I found Jason, and I thought I got to get him on the program and talk about his work, and started digging into him a little bit. And he just does some amazing things, and would love to interview him. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and get him on the line. Jason, good evening. Welcome to AM 630 and the Fringe Radio Show.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
How are you enjoy? Is it nice and warm? My last guest was on in Philly. Nice and warm up in New York today.
Yeah, today was really the first day that you realize that spring is here.
Well, we've had just beautiful weather here, and then winter came back on Tuesday and dumped a foot of snow.
Really?
Yeah, but we're back in the 60s and 70s. You couldn't even tell it snowed. The mountains, of course, are full of snow, but it crazy. One thing about Utah, if you don't like the weather, just stick around. It will change. But you folks on the East Coast have just gotten pounded this year with the snowstorms and the cold, and especially Boston. I mean, just craziness, man.
Yeah, the good part is when you make a movie about Back to the Future, and most of the people live out in L.A., I got to spend a lot of time in L.A. this winter and get out of the cold.
Without a doubt. Well, hey, it's an honor to have you on board. And I was just tooling around. I love having filmmakers come on the program because being here in Utah, I'm a native Chicagoan, but I've lived here for 22 years. I've had a little taste of Sundance, all the great small independent films that have just turned into amazing, huge pieces of work, and the amount of effort and time that guys like yourself put in. Why don't you give our listeners a little bit of background? It looks like you were headed to be an attorney, is what I kind of read out of it. But you've had a long lust for filmmaking. Why don't you bring our listeners up to speed and let them know a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I went to college like everybody else, kind of didn't really have a clue what I wanted to do. And, my parents always wanted me to be a lawyer. I kind of got into it and studied, got into law school, and about 3 months before school, I said, you know what, this isn't for me. So I deferred my enrollment, but that was sort of, never deferred till never. And then I kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went to work with my father's business, and I was doing a lot of graphic and artwork there. And it just sort of snowballed, and one thing led to the next. Got into websites a little bit, and then from there video, and never looked back.
Wow, that's a 90-degree turn, man, from criminal justice to film.
That's a typical, that's a complete 180. It's certainly not the typical career path of most filmmakers, and it's funny because a lot of the work is, as you mentioned before I came on, that we do is, it's very corporate in nature. We use a lot of different freelancers here in New York. The New York scene, there's a lot of corporate work to go around. So, I probably work with 30 or 40. Different guys in a typical year, and every one of them went to film school here. So it's interesting when you're kind of working with them, and you just took a totally different path.
Exactly. Now you got your master's degree from NYU, is that correct, in filmmaking?
Yeah. No, that was it was actually in sports business and marketing. By the time I went there, though, I was already involved in filmmaking, and I kind of wanted to get into sports production, which worked out.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, again, like I said, just an amazing turn. And most people that I talk to that are independent filmmakers, so many of them are also. I can't say this is true across the board, but they love what they do. But a lot of them are. They're working a $9 an hour day job to get into this industry.
Yeah, and I think I was that from that perspective, I was no different than anybody else. When I first started, I was doing a lot of event filmmaking, which I still do from time to time now. But so different life events, weddings, whatever. And when you're coming up, you're trying to build a reputation. It's difficult. It's not like you can go into the wedding filmmaking depot, and next thing you know, you have a 40-hour-a-week job. I mean, it's mostly a weekend gig, and you have to build up a reputation when you start. So I was actually working on the side. I was working for a real estate company, just kind of helping out around the office and collecting, dealing with supers and bringing back checks and kind of doing running for them while I was starting my filmmaking career. And there was just sort of this turning point where it was like, okay, I have enough work as a filmmaker, I can do this. Right. And, cold turkey started, that event filmmaking business on my own.
Well, and even too, what I've noticed with a lot of filmmakers, again, I've grown to know quite a few of them here in town. The other big problem is a lot of times they'll go do freelance, they'll go do work for other people trying to build their portfolio, and so many of them end up getting stiff. They end up not getting paid at the end of the day. So it's really not that it's all about money, but I mean we got to live. We got to make a few bucks to survive and keep a roof over our heads. It's a really tough. It's a tough business. It's a tough industry to get into.
Yeah, no question about it. And like you said. It's also a lot of it's low wages when you first start. There's a lot of you really got to put in the time and know it's something that you want to do and stick with it, because otherwise, it can be very easy to burn out. And people have described me a little bit as a dreamer, and you have to have that in you, or else,
right.
To see that light at the end of the tunnel, it can be very difficult.
Well, the way I came across you, Jason, is I'm a when we started this program off. Of course, we did a lot of stuff with, and we still do, with paranormal research and ufology, and then we kind of moved into science. But I've always had a passion for old movies, and in old movies, I'm not saying that has to be stuff out of the 50s, but older movies the kids of today's generation don't even, they've never heard of. I mean, it's there's very few franchises, with the exception of maybe Star Trek, that has kept its continuity going for it's going to go into its 50th year. I mean, from the humming planets and the cardboard sets to a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, it's held in there. But when I came across your film, your documentary that you're working on, Back in Time, I thought I got to talk to this fella, because I just love stuff out of that time period and the impact those films had on people back in the day.
Yeah, and Back to the Future is an interesting franchise. I mean, I grew up with it. I always loved it. But what's interesting in working in this project is I've talked to a lot of the actors, and many of them do a lot of the Comic-Cons and fan shows and stuff like that.
Right.
And what they have said is that, Back to the Future was, it was the biggest film of 1985. So it was big when it came out, and, then it came to home video, and I'm sure it was big too eventually when that happened. But it kind of died out a little bit. And then it just picked up steam. Somewhere around 10 years ago, it just got really big again, and now it's been on this tremendous snowball, just growing and growing and growing to the point where here we are, 2015. It's the 30th anniversary of the first film, and it's bigger than ever. I mean, you can't. It's almost like you can't go through a day without hearing a new piece of Back to the Future news this year.
Well, can you give us a little bit of insight on so what is your project about, and give us some of course, your film's coming out. It's going to be the end of this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, October 2015.
But maybe give us some tidbits and stuff, and what drove you to put this together?
So it's interesting, because I think where it is now, we could have never imagined it would be when we started. But it was about 2 years ago, 2 years ago this month, and that's when we launched our first Kickstarter. But I'll roll you back about 6 months before that. I was working on a private film, and it was a bar mitzvah film, actually. And a father had written the script, and he wanted to produce this narrative for the bar mitzvah. And basically, the story was that the father took the son back in time to visit his grandfather, and then his father, so he could see them all when they were younger. And that was the premise of the film. And as a prop, they rented a DeLorean. It was a stock DeLorean, not a Back to the Future replica or anything, just a plain old off the Belfast line DeLorean.
Right.
And the day
no,
we were
no
filming,
cocaine in the trunk.
no cocaine in the trunk, nothing. And the day we were filming, people were literally stopping their cars in the street, and I was like, "This is unbelievable." People love Back to the Future so much, and it didn't matter that the car didn't have a flux capacitor, the big air vents on the back. I mean, it didn't matter. The second people saw this DeLorean, they were literally parking their car in the middle of the street, getting out and taking pictures of it. And I said, I should make a documentary about this. This is unbelievable. And over the next few months, I started, really thinking about it, taking it more seriously. A friend of mine, his name is Brett Culp. He's a filmmaker out of Tampa. He made a documentary about the power of Batman, and a great documentary called Legends of the Night. You should give it a look. And he crowdfunded his film and raised about $60,000. Turned out that was actually his second crowdfunding campaign. He had raised $25,000 the year before to get the initial funding for it. And that kind of gave me the motivation to say, all right, you know what? If you could do this, you could really crowdfund the film on Kickstarter. I'm going to give it a try too. At that point, we went up to Hubbardston, Massachusetts, in April of 2013, and met with Bill and Patrick Shea, who are father-son out of Massachusetts, and they have a great love for Back to the Future. And along with that love, they have some really cool props in the film, including a screen-used DeLorean. It's the only one held in private hands. One of the DeLoreans from Back to the Future Part 3, and they had just gotten Marty's truck, the pickup truck, screen-used from Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. And, because they were in Massachusetts, it was drivable for us from New York, which was a big element because we had no money at the time for this project. So we drive up there, spend a day with them. We film interviews with them, and another guy named Ryan who had bought another DeLorean that Bill Shea owned, and we put together this trailer that we threw on Kickstarter. And in June of 2013, we raised $46,000 to begin production of this film. And when we first started the production, like you had mentioned in the opening, this was supposed to look at the cultural impact of Back to the Future, and we wanted it to be sort of a very niche focus, and that was stories relating to the DeLorean time machine. So obviously, Bill and Patrick Shea, they had a time machine that from the movie that they owned. We would plan on interviewing another couple by the name of Kerry and Oliver Holler. They've driven to all 50 states raising money and awareness for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So another story that just kind of revolved around the DeLorean time machine. But as things started, as we got into production, again, it was just sort of, once the ball got rolling, it never really stopped. And we wanted the participation of as many actors as possible. Bob Gale, and I can't thank him enough. He's the writer and producer of all three Back to the Future movies. He believed in what we were doing in our vision from day one, and even before we had done the first Kickstarter, we had kind of gotten his blessing, and we knew he was going to be interviewed. But he had said, "Listen, if you need help getting to Christopher Lloyd or a couple other people, let me know." So we had kind of had the feeling from the beginning that we were going to be able to get Christopher Lloyd, although I guess you never know until it happens.
Right.
But we never expected to get the participation of essentially everybody from the cast. Minus Tom Wilson, who plays Biff, and Crispin Glover, who plays George McFly, who we knew we would never get because they're not really, they don't really do the whole Back to the Future fandom thing anymore. So, it was crazy. I mean, this January, we had the opportunity to interview Michael J. Fox, and I think things really changed for us once that happened. And it's just been, a crazy ride to the point where, focusing on the DeLorean, it was just too narrow a focus. We realized that, this isn't a film just about the DeLorean anymore. I mean, this is hopefully going to be the companion documentary to Back to the Future.
Right.
And that's where we are now. We wrapped production, officially when we launched our second Kickstarter, which was about 5 weeks ago. But we still have a couple more interviews that we're planning on doing, a couple planned out, a couple sort of in the works. and we're heavily involved in post-production. I'm actually going to see a rough cut of the film on Monday. So in 2 days from now, I'm going to see the first official rough cut.
Did you, when I was looking, and again, for our listeners, if you want to check out the website, it's called backintimefilm.com, is that correct?
Yes.
And the interviews that are on there, now I didn't go through them all, but were you able to actually, I see under behind the scenes, were you able to sit down with Michael J. Fox and these other people?
Yeah, so, I mean, everyone that you see there, there's actually a link on our website. It's under the film, and it says the interviews, or I forget how we titled it, but, I mean, you could scroll down the list. We sat down with each and every one of them, Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Claudia Wells, James Tolkien, who plays Principal Strickland, and then some great crew interviews. Robert Zemeckis, the director of the film, Bob Gale, the writer, Dean Cundy, the director of photography. We even interviewed a guy by the name of Mick Smith, who was the pyrotechnician in Back to the Future Part 3. He blew up the old train. So really ran the gamut. We've done over 50 interviews. We have more planned. I guess I'll make the official announcement live on your show, but we're going to head up to Boston in 2 weeks and, interview the CEO of Terrafugia, and they're a company that invented one of the first world's, flying cars.
Wow.
Flying cars have actually been around forever. They've been models that date back, I think, to the 60s, but, this is actually a roadworthy car, and you press a button and the wings come down and you can take off. So, they're in development of that. I believe 2017, although don't quote me on it, is when they want to start releasing these to the public. But they've been approved by the FAA, and now they're just going through the approval process for the actual car elements of their flying car. So, there are a couple different companies out there doing that, and it's just, I don't think Back to the Future necessarily spawned flying cars. I think it's an idea that's sort of been around since the beginning of aviation, but it's certainly really cool to see how much society has changed because of Back to the Future related things. The hoverboard was finally invented last year,
right.
By a company called Hendo Hover out in Northern California, and we had the opportunity to interview the creators of that company, Jill and Greg Henderson. We also, my entire crew, we got to ride the hoverboard, so that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool for us too, as Back to the Future fans get to ride an actual hoverboard. So, just really cool inventions like that people want to make happen because of Back to the Future. So it's great to see, and it's been a fun ride.
Do you ever get a sense that there's so many films out there that get a sequel, and I know there was a lot of back in the day there was talk about another one. Do you ever get a sense, or did you have the opportunity to sit down with those actors and say, would you be willing to do it again, or is that something that they won't even consider?
We asked them all. The general consensus sort of in the public is that there won't be a Back to the Future 4, but as inquisitive filmmakers, it didn't stop us from asking.
Right.
I think it's interesting when you ask some of the actors, or most of the actors, they say that they would do it. Why not?
Right.
Ironically, one of the ones who says that he wouldn't is Michael J. Fox. Obviously, his health is an issue, and it was a grueling process for him. So I don't think he has the burning desire to do another one. But Christopher Lloyd says, yeah, sure, why not? And you get the same response from a lot of the other actors. But when you ask Robert Zemeckis, the guy who directed and co-wrote the 3 films, I mean, his opinion is absolutely not. I mean, it's done. Why mess with something that was great? He also had a very interesting take on the number 3 and how perfect it is and how 4 is just kind of boring. So certainly as far as he's concerned, it'll never happen. Bob Gale feels the same way. But what's interesting, I think the fans, have a hunger for it.
Right.
And that's why, a project like ours has gotten so much attention because, fans want more content out of Back to the Future. And if it's not going to be a follow-up movie, then let it be a film like ours, a documentary that, gets to talk to some of the world's biggest fans and go back and talk to the cast and crew and, just get a new spin on it if there's not going to be a new film. And, obviously it's my project, so certainly I'm going to feel this way. But I think it's almost better because, you know, to me, as a big fan of Back to the Future, I don't think a fourth movie could do it justice. I mean, you know, I've seen movies like The Next Karate Kid and,
right.
you know, stuff like that. And look, you know, a lot of decisions in Hollywood are made, you know, with a pocketbook.
Sure.
And Back to the Future 4 or a remake of Back to the Future, I'm sure it would make a ton of money. Whatever, you know, if Universal came out and did that again, you know, they can go to the well and they can make a lot of money. And it's not like movies today are so great where, you know, a Back to the Future 4 would, you know, pale in comparison to whatever else is out there. You know, it might be just as good, and that kind of speaks to the climate of where we are with movies today.
Well,
but
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it's not going to be good. You know, it's not going to. It could never do the original trilogy, you know, justice.
Right.
So it's better that they don't, and we get different things like this. You know, they're planning on doing Back to the Future the musical, which is going to launch in London, and you know, things like that. Just seeing it just a little bit differently, or the video game that came out, documentaries like ours, and there are others that are coming out this year as well that look at the film a little differently. But to try to remake this film, you know, I think we want it, and it would be cool, and all that. But you know, it's never going to be the original trilogy.
Well, and you know, the other thing I was going to say is the time frame, and I mean, let's be realistic, Jason. A lot of the films that come out are going to be or kid oriented. I mean, they're going to be towards not little kids, but they're going to be to that younger audience. And to put a fourth film out, you'd have to have something, because the time span has been so long. You'd have to have something there that would bring, you know, that would bring the story up. I mean, I think in the Star Trek franchise, where the new movie, you know, I think that was kind of really one of the first movies that said, okay, here's this new buzz, you know, the new phrase, alternate universe or what have you. And they got away with it because they had the money of Paramount and the director, you know, I mean, it all came together. But I think what makes, I mean, in the Star Trek universe, there was so many stories going on besides Kirk and Spock. I mean, you know, you had all these different programs, but with Back to the Future, it was this cast of characters. I agree with you. It would be cool. I would love to see something like that, but it's just been too much time in between, and you'd have to take a good portion of the movie just to set things up again, so today's current day audience, the younger audience, would understand where it's coming from. And looking at the way it was done back then, the kids of today would say that's pretty corny. You know what I mean? It would have to be a whole new. It would give it a whole new flavor, and I think that would just ruin it.
Yeah, and you know, one of the great things about Back to the Future is something that they didn't do, and that is they didn't go crazy on the special effects.
Right.
Even though it's a sci-fi film and there's a time travel element involved, they, you know, the whole time travel sequence, if you think about it, you get in the car, you drive up to 88, a couple flashing lights, and you're in the next place.
Right.
And that was something that they consciously did. They didn't want to spend too much time on the special effects of it, and maybe it was good foresight because, you know, 30 years later, it would not hold up, and it would be a hokey special effects film. And the plot was really, you know, it was very much story-driven. And I feel like you said, if they redid that movie, it would be all about special effects and all about, you know, I mean, you know, the Michael Bay film that came out this year, which essentially was, I mean, I guess go see that. I haven't seen it yet. I wanted to see it in the theater. I didn't, so I'm gonna have to wait for it to come out on iTunes. But you know, Michael Bay did a film this year which essentially had the exact plot, and the name of the movie was The Almanac. I'm not sure if that's a tip to the, you know, Great Sports Almanac and Back to the Future. But that's exactly what you're talking about. It's really aimed towards that high school crowd.
Right.
You know, kids go back in time and they screw up the future by going back. You know, so they sort of use that Back to the Future element of you know, how time travel works and what happens when you time travel and then you got to go fix it. I'm certainly not giving away anything since I haven't even seen the movie myself yet. But so and that's, I think, what you'd get. You know, I think, you know, they could do a Back to the Future remake and, you know, cast, you know, whoever the young Michael J. Fox is today to be Marty McFly. And, you know, I don't know if Christopher Lloyd would be Doc again. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. You know, that's one idea. Somebody asked me on another interview, they said, you know, if you were going to do Back to the Future 4, what would you make the plot? So if you had to do it, I said, well, I don't know. I think maybe it would be cool to go further into the future. You know, in 1980, 2009, we took a good look at what 2015 would look like. So maybe now it's time to take a look at 2045 or somewhere around there. And maybe that's sort of the way where you can do the best job of not making it hokey or not trying to remake the same movie that can't be made better.
Right.
But I think they should just leave it alone.
I agree with you. Do you get Jason in your film? Are you going to? One thing I find interesting, and you see that in a lot of the director's cuts. Will they allow you to maybe show some stuff that we didn't see in the other films, or is that all property of Universal or Warner Brothers, whoever owns it? Do you get an opportunity to get to hear about maybe some of the scenes that were cut out or some of the stuff that people just don't know about?
Yeah, as far as showing things that haven't been shown yet, we're not going to have the opportunity to necessarily do that. We do play. There is some stuff that was in like the 25th anniversary release, some special features and stuff like that we're going to touch on. A big element is Eric Stoltz. Obviously the Back to the Future fan is very well versed on the story, but Marty McFly was not originally played by Michael J. Fox. It was played by Eric Stoltz, and about 6 weeks into filming, Eric was replaced because things just weren't working. So, they replaced him with Michael J. Fox, who was actually the original actor that they had wanted for the part. And then, so we talked to everyone about that and kind of got their opinion. So I think to answer your question, it's not necessarily, new footage or anything like that, but it's getting the people's take who were in the film, talking about new things and hearing their reactions, and hopefully giving fans an insight into, that type of thing that you've never really heard before.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that what you're doing is amazing, and I think it's going to reignite, people to go out and watch the whole series again. One of our listeners commented and said Ted's brother was the assistant prosecuting attorney in the real DeLorean case.
Look at that.
Yeah. Little factoids that you don't even realize,
Yeah, and that's what's cool about Back to the Future. We've joked and said, people have asked what the next thing we're going to work on is. I said, maybe Back in Time too, because I think as we've gone through this process, so many stories have surfaced. One of the things that we haven't shot yet, we're going to be shooting up in Vancouver next month, and we didn't want to wait so long, but obviously scheduling a shoot on the other side, of the continent took some planning.
Right.
But that was a story that didn't come to light literally until we launched our second Kickstarter. So we've been working on this film for 2 years and didn't know it existed, because the fandom of Back to the Future runs deep. And I think as far as a takeaway from making this film and working on this for so long, the biggest thing that I could say is that Back to the Future has a global reach that you can't even imagine. And I don't even think our film is going to do it justice. And that's just because, we don't have the budget to travel to 4 corners of the earth to really show kind of what goes on. But, the media requests that we've had, for example, on our first day of Kickstarter, I did an interview in South Korea for a South Korean podcast, and I actually I got a chance to see that cut, and they haven't translated it into English yet, so I don't know what they say. But it's just so interesting to see how much love there is for Back to the Future all over the place. I mean, we had about 2,500 backers for this project, more than that, and about half of them are international because the Back to the Future fandom, it's huge. The Back to the Future Facebook page has 2.7 million followers, and the administrator of that page is in Europe. So it's this is not just an American film. And what's cool about it is it has some great American values, and I think that's what people love about it. We had the opportunity to interview Fabian Riggle, who's the director of Secret Cinema, and they did a great thing for Back to the Future last summer. And I asked him, I said, why does Back to the Future resonate in England? And, he said, they love those sort of American values.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are with our guest, Jason Aron. Jason is the filmmaker. His film coming out later in the year called Back in Time. It's about, well, it started out with the DeLorean, then went into the whole Back to the Future film genre, and it looks like it's going to be amazing. Again, Jason, thank you so much for giving us some time on your weekend.
My pleasure.
You know, I think you're right. Right before the commercial break, you were saying how in other countries how the film is viewed. I think what's going to be so great about what you're doing is it's going to kind of reignite the spark, and also let people our age, my age, people that saw the film back then, all these films, and fell in love with them, be able to show them to their kids and get them excited. Because that's the thing, today's kids, man, you show them these older films, and not that Back to the Future is that old. They just don't see anything in it. So maybe seeing a documentary like this will get them ignited a little bit,
Yeah, and one of the stretch goals that we had during our Kickstarter campaign, because we had gotten so many requests for it, we're actually going to subtitle the film in 6 different languages, but including English, because we actually got requests to translate the film to subtitle in English. Apparently, like in different Asian countries, they speak English, but it's hard for them to follow the dialect, so reading it is just easier. And then beyond that, French, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and I think I'm forgetting one, but there's just so much, desire for Back to the Future out there, and I'm glad that we're going to be able to kind of bring that, to the world. It's very humbling and honoring, to know that we get to do that.
Are you going to take this film to, as you mentioned, the Comic-Cons here in Salt Lake? Of course, we're pretty new to the Comic-Con thing, but it just exploded. Christopher Lloyd was here a couple of times. Of course, he works on that film, on the series called Granite Flats that's filmed here in Salt Lake. But I mean, they brought it for the first year of the con. There was no Back to the Future stuff. The second showing, there was one of the guys that had a replica DeLorean, and it got so much attention. Do you see yourself in the con venue at all with your film?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've kind of had 2 tastes of it already, and I'll tell you about 2 more coming up. But we went to Cleveland to film at their WizardCon. So it's their version of Comic-Con. And I didn't even know when we went. It was their first year of doing it as well. So it was their first con there. And we went to film B-roll for that couple, Terry and Oliver Holler, who I told you about.
Right.
We did their interview there, and then we interviewed them, and then we filmed kind of what they were doing at the con, which was, they had their DeLorean time machine on display, and you could pay some money and take a picture with it, and that money gets donated to the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which is a great thing that they do. And to see the attention and the lines that were there, I joked with Oliver, and he said to me, he's like, if you want to see me pass out, just hang out for another couple hours, because it was crazy, just the constant flow of people on the day that we were filming them. It was really amazing to see. And that was my first con experience as an attendee as well. So I was like, wow, this is crazy. It doesn't get any bigger than this. And then we had the opportunity to go to Anaheim a few weeks back, and we did our first speaking engagement at a panel. That was at WonderCon in Anaheim. And I know big WonderCon. You go to a con, you figure, all right, they're all like this.
Right.
WonderCon gets about 60,000 people, which is, interestingly, half of what they get at San Diego Comic-Con. But, 60,000 people is a lot of people. And they gave us a panel. It was the first panel at Open WonderCon. It was at 12 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. And we were thinking, like, oh, man, it's the opening panel. People aren't going to be there yet. They're not going to get in. They're not going to have their badges. How many people are going to show up? And what's interesting is on their website, it's really cool. People can sort of RSVP that they're coming to your panel. So we had an idea beforehand how many people are coming to our panels, versus other panels and whatever. And about 200 people had pre-registered. And I was like, oh, my God, that's amazing. That's great. And we walked into the room that morning. We got there about 10 o'clock, and the room was huge. we said, oh my God, only 200 people are coming. It's going to be empty.
Right, right.
Because just your eyes told you that there were 300 or 400 seats, and then we counted. And there were over 400 seats in the room. And the panel started. The room was full. And by the end of the panel, there were people standing along the walls. We couldn't believe just the amount of people and attention that came, and it was great. And we have a couple other speaking engagements ahead of us that we know at different cons. We've submitted for a panel at the San Diego Comic-Con, which we hope that we get to do. If we do, we have a really big surprise that we'll announce if that happens. And
are you going to be at the Salt Lake one in September?
I don't think so. Our film's coming out in October, so we're kind of leaving.
Okay.
We're kind of leaving those months open, but I certainly won't say no to anything. So
if you need a little, I do a little bit of work with it. If you need a little bit of help or insight or whatever, I'd be glad to help you because
that'd be great.
We have, the following out here of Back to the Future is just so ginormous, especially with Christopher Lloyd, because he does so much with the local, so much stuff that is filmed in Utah. The showings for him are just sold out beyond belief. So
we got to witness that firsthand back in June. We filmed the DeLorean car show in Ohio, which was a gathering of about 300 DeLorean car owners, about 500 people, and he came out for a day, and it was it was madness. We were there for the whole time.
Bedlam.
So it's a contrast in terms of the buzz around that show, and then the buzz when he got there was crazy. But next week we're going to be at the Tribeca Film Festival. Obviously it's a huge film festival in Tribeca, and they're doing sort of a Back to the Future day. They're going to have a DJ playing 80s and 50s music and make your own DeLorean and skateboarding exhibitions, all these really cool things around Back to the Future. And then they're going to cap it off with a screening of Back to the Future, the part one, the original Back to the Future,
right,
in a theater that holds 900 people. And it's going to be a major event, and we're going to have a panel prior to that. So we're going to sort of introduce Back to the Future, show some clips from our film. So that's really exciting just to be attached to to a property like the Tribeca Film Festival. And literally the morning after, so this is next Sunday, so a week from tomorrow, we get on a plane and fly to Chicago. We'll be at C2E2, which is one of the cons in Chicago, and we'll be doing a panel there as well. So look forward to meeting fans out there and just doing it all over again.
Well, the cons are we out here we had our first Comic-Con 2 years ago, and the orchestrators they actually rented a place for the first one, figuring that if they could sell 5,000 tickets, they would be happy. They ended up having to move the venue downtown because of all the people that wanted to go. The first time around, it was they sold out at 70,000. They had to cap it. The second one was 120,000, bigger than New York's or any of the other ones. It's just mind blowing. I've been to all of them. I'll be honest with you. I go there during the media times. I meet some people, and I'm out of there by about 2:00 because I've had enough. But it's just the enthusiasm that people have for this stuff. They can't get enough of it.
That is correct. Wow. See that, and that's one of the cool things about just sort of the whole culture. I would have never known that they drove 100,000 people in Salt Lake to
Oh yeah, 120,000.
It's crazy. I think that's one of the really cool things, and even with Back to the Future, what's interesting when you walk around Comic-Con, you see some of the most amazing costumes. To me,
yes.
The cosplay is I think that's the coolest part of Comic-Con, just kind of seeing what people come up with. And, in Cleveland we saw a couple Marty McFly costumes, and in Anaheim, just because, the sheer numbers were higher, we saw more of it. You see Doc Brown's and you see Marty McFly's, and but it pales in comparison to just the plethora of other costumes. But, we had people come up to us and say, listen, when we saw that you were doing the Back to the Future panel, that's all we had to see, Back to the Future, and we were there. So the love, like you said, it runs so deep. It's a great thing to see.
Let me ask you this, Jason. With the thing, like you said, this all sprouted from the DeLorean. my understanding now, to try to get your hands on a DeLorean is near impossible. But wasn't it true that really not that many years ago there was quite a few of them out there that were pretty affordable? I mean, the film, of course, really spiked things up, but my understanding is for a while they were just kind of laying around and people were picking them up. I mean, it was not that big of a deal. Now it's huge to own one of these things.
Yeah, I guess the best metaphor is if you look at it like a stock. They've certainly always been available, and the raw numbers, they made about 9,000 of them, and 7,000 of them are still on the road, which is a testament to the love of that vehicle. But if you look at it like a stock, you can go on eBay probably right now, and there's a dozen DeLoreans that are available to buy. But now would be the worst time to buy one because they have skyrocketed in value. The desire for them is as high as ever because Back to the Future is as popular as ever. And I think just as time goes on, there's this real understanding that, well, these cars aren't going to be around forever. And, I think people are going to start holding on to them more and there's always been this thing with DeLorean owners and Back to the Future fans because the DeLorean purists don't like when Back to the Future fans take these cars and start drilling into them and turning them into Back to the Future cars. But, I mean, let's be real. If Back to the Future never comes out, or if they have a Ford Mustang, in Back to the Future, there's no way that DeLoreans, they'd be gone. You'd never even see them anymore. So the movie kind of made the popularity of the car. So you can get one, but, the value, like you said, it's gone up. Today, if you want a concourse DeLorean, you're probably looking at around $40,000, anywhere between $40,000 and $50,000. Whereas 10 years ago, you probably could have gotten that for $20,000, maybe.
Right.
Even 5 years ago, probably $10,000 less, maybe around $30,000. What's cool is there's still kind of beat up ones that come around once in a while, and if you can get your hands on one of those, and if you're a car guy and you like to fix them up, you can do that. What's cool about it is that, the DeLorean has a history of its own, and it's not necessarily been the best car in the world mechanically. Right. And I think that's why a lot of people end up moving them because, they're hard to take care of. It ends up not being a daily driver because of the maintenance issues, and then just affordability to keep a car around as a toy. Not everyone can afford to do that, so they kind of sell to the next guy, and the next guy sells to the next guy. So that's sort of a cool subculture in and of itself.
Yeah, matter of fact, I was looking on eBay. There's a handful of them out there for right around 2022. The DMC 12s.
Right, that is the one and only model.
Right. Yeah, it's just interesting. But like I said, I remember there was a time when they were pretty cheap, and I know again with the stainless steel body, there was of course a lot of people said, "Well, you buy the car, you never have to worry about it rusting." But I don't know about the undercarriage, But
exactly.
And then what was the joke about the rebate being in the trunk or whatever?
Yeah, there was a great documentary about the DeLorean car. Just the car itself and going through the whole history and how they got funded. It's certainly worth taking a look at. I think it came out on television, so I'd watched it on YouTube, so it's out there somewhere.
So we've got to wrap up pretty soon, Jason. When now your film is going to be out toward the end of the year. How is it going to be released in some theaters around the country? How is it going to be released?
So we don't know yet. Essentially, the one thing we do know is that we're going to release it at this thing called We're Going Back. It's an event that's being held celebrating the 30th anniversary of Back to the Future out in California. October 21st is the day that Marty went into the future, and that's so it's being hailed as Future Day. There'll be a lot of Back to the Future events on that day, and that's when our film's going to publicly premiere. Beyond that, we don't know. We kind of have a lot of options. We've been contacted from places you couldn't even imagine, in terms of screening the film. So, we're going to see where it ends up. I mean, our goal is to get it into as many hands as we possibly can, and however that happens, as it happens, we'll be sure to update everybody.
Well, if I can help you in any way with Salt Lake Comic Con, I'd be glad to. We've got a couple small older independent theaters here in town, in the old sections of town. And matter of fact, one of them over in a little part of the city called Sugar House, they still show every other month. They show 2001: A Space Odyssey. They show all these different old films and stuff like that. And again, they show Back to the Future there. You could see it on a big screen. So anything we could do to help you out, I'd love to help you with, and love to see at our Comic-Con if you could make it happen, because I guarantee you the line would be out the door for you.
That would be great. It sounds great. I'm gonna definitely take a look at that now.
Sounds good. I'll let you go. Let you get on with your weekend. Again, it was an honor to have you here. Again, Jason Aron was our guest. You can go out to his website, Jason Aron with one R, on.com. And then again, what's the home for the film, Jason?
backintimefilm.com.
Okay. I wish you the best, my friend. I will send you some info. I'd love to keep in touch with you. And if you do make it to Salt Lake, I'd love to have you in the studio here and talk about your film. And I wish you the best success.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds great. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, Jason. Take care. Good night.
Take care.
Bye-bye.